When I was at my lowest ebb in life, when I had destroyed all my relationships, my career, my finances, and was on the brink of totally destroying myself, I remember having one thought vividly. If I could understand it, then I could fix it. Whether it was depression, anxiety, addiction, anger, laziness, shame, or any amount of the negative emotions I would play on repeat over and over. My last hope was this belief. If I could understand it, I could fix it. What follows was perhaps the most influential understanding I have ever gained over the last 6 years. And to this day is the single biggest reason for the positive change that has redirected my life. It might help change yours also. G'day, I'm Gary Fay, the Neurostoic, and I've been helping high-performing individuals, teams, and organizations build mental strength, success, and resilience by combining the science of the mind with the philosophy of action for over 20 years now. And now you too can get all of the actionable tactics that I share absolutely free by smashing that subscribe button right now. But back to your success. And more importantly, back to that battle in your mind. Do you ever feel like your mind is working against you? Like you're constantly fighting with yourself or at war with your own thoughts? If so, you might not be as crazy as you think. Our brains are complex creatures. Or as Emerson Pugh put it, if the human brain was so simple that we could understand it, we would be so simple that we couldn't. You know the scenario. You impulsively eat that extra cookie, even when you told yourself that you wouldn't. And we all know we're not just talking about cookies. Feel free to insert any thought or behavior in there. Drinking alcohol, gambling, spending too much money, avoiding exercise, anger, anxiety, depression, any of those typical things a logical mind would want to avoid. So why can't I? Well, stick with me for a couple of minutes and I'll not only help you understand why, I'll also share what you can do about it to make sure you not only win the battle inside your mind, but win the war over your life. It seems your mind might not be a lone wolf. When you ask of yourself, why do you do the things that you don't want to be doing? Or think the things that you don't want to be thinking? You typically challenge your mind as one single entity in that moment of your pain. But that might be too simplistic of you to truly understand what is going on, and more importantly, what to do about it. Stuck deep in the recesses of your conscious, subconscious, and unconscious are three combatants, all vying for supremacy in those 6 inches between your ears. It's not really a fair fight, but you do have a secret weapon. Based on the development of the brain, we are talking about primal thinking, prime thinking, and program thinking. There is ultimately one king of the jungle, and it may surprise you to know exactly what that is. But let's start with your primal mind, the big dog, tipping the scales at around 500 million years old. This is your emotional center, that part of your brain rooted in survival instinct, drives, and desires. Those activities that keep us alive and sustained as individuals and as a species. Desire for food, sex, connection, status, and all the good stuff. These drives were developed in our ancestral past, where quick reactions meant the difference between life and death. This primal is your brain, emotional, protective, and impulsive. It jumps to conclusions, seeks immediate gratification, and is driven by feelings. For you, this might explain that sudden burst of road rage, or that impulse buy that you regret the next day. Not being able to say no when offered that second, third, or fourth beer, or even convincing yourself to stay warm under the covers rather than hitting the gym like you promised you would. These primal responses are not only natural, they are necessary, but they are also extremely reactionary. And they operate at 5 times the speed of the brain that you'd prefer to engage in most non-life-threatening situations. Recognizing the primal in you is the first step. Accepting its existence and value is the key to building a sustainable and successful future where your responses are considered, committed, and conscious. decisions and actions more driven from that second part of our mind, the prime. Different variations of this frontal cortex part of your mind might be anywhere from 200,000 years in development to 200 million years. But any way you look at it, this is most definitely the new kid on the block. The prime mind might be the little dog in the fight, but it is no doubt valuable. At its core, it's what makes us human and allowed us to develop as a species that in some way is currently at the top of the food chain. This part of your mind is the reasoning part, the logical part, and that part of your brain that can either justify the emotional, often illogical or ill-advised decisions of the primal brain, or it can create a conscious plan to develop the grit, commitment, and courage to build a life that you want. It's also the part of the brain responsible for conscience and that feeling of regret you have many times after engaging in road rage, making that impulse purchase, giving into that second, third, or fourth beer, and even hitting snooze to enjoy those covers over that workout you know you should be hitting. So we now know about that reactionary side of our mind, the primal, and the more conscious and conscience, logical part of our mind, the prime. But that knowledge is not much good in the absence of the third piece of the pie, the program. The programmed part of our mind is just that. The part of our mind that over however many years you have walked this planet has been watching, listening and learning intently to both the primal and prime minds. It has become somewhat of a vast database. In here, every habit, belief and value that you uphold is stored and dictates somewhat of your autopilot responses. The programmed mind works similar to AI. It is constantly learning based on the inputs that you give it. The inputs of your thoughts, your beliefs, and your actions. For example, if your primal mind has been riding roughshod over your program, constantly reminding you how you have a stressful job, and of that one story where a drink after work would help take the edge off. And of course, if you have only one, it's not so bad to have two. Pretty soon, the program picks up a pattern. When I get stressed, a drink helps. The program really buys into this outcome and also has no concept of time, space, or relationship. And so it's incapable of discerning work stress from any other stress. Relationship stress, social stress, financial stress, life stress. When the program senses stress, it goes into the memory bank and asks, what have I been taught about dealing with stress? What is the quickest method I can deploy to alleviate this feeling without barely knowing? And the next minute, you're on to that third drink. Of course, this doesn't just happen with negative outcomes, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight. But there does seem to be a trend to how our programmed habits are created. While positive and negative programs are created in exactly the same way, either the prime or the primal mind laying down significant tracks to influence the program over time. Often those habits and often those autopilots developed as a result of the primal emotional brain tend to appear more subconsciously and have a more negative impact over time. Now, that's not to say that the primal mind is bad or a negative. Quite the opposite, in fact. The primal mind is an exceptionally well adapted identifier of danger, of negative internal and external states, and of creating a spark and momentum for movement. More often, the role of the emotional primal brain is to move us, often quickly, away from pain. Something very important in the evolution of our species. The primal brain does not care and often cannot even determine the difference between physical pain and emotional pain, but just that there is pain and action needs to be taken. The primal brain also operates around 5 times faster than the prime or the logical brain. Again, for very good reason. Not always do you have the luxury of time when considering what action to take in the face of pain. And so that means the emotional mind usually gets the jump on your logical side. You might have heard the saying, people make decisions based on emotion and then justify them with logic. This exact point is the reason why. But when you take the first step towards a negative outcome, perhaps an addiction, a deep negative thought pattern, anger, or any of the other regular behaviors you routinely wish you didn't involve yourself with, It's very hard to identify the exact moment that the emotional mind, the primal brain, created a compelling and consistent enough argument to create the program that you now run on. Truth be told, it was probably so minor for so long that your logical prime mind didn't even see it as an issue, and certainly wasn't interested in extrapolating out where this would all end up. And then one day, you wake up and the pattern is established. Your automatic responses have been carved, almost in stone, to where you are continuing a behavior that on many occasions you don't want to be doing, and you have very little idea why. The good news is that you don't have to be a slave to that behavior, those thoughts, or that pattern anymore, but it will take some effort. You see, as I mentioned earlier, the way we find ourselves down deep, dark holes of despair, engaging in activities that we would prefer not to, is the exact same path that we use to drag ourselves out of the hole. They are the exact same steps that can move you from where you are now to where you want to be. And they are the exact same steps high performers follow to achieve optimal outcomes. Unlike the path to destruction, creating positive pathways in the program has to be done consciously. Unlike creating an addiction, achieved when the emotional primal brain forces its will on the program subconsciously, it's time for the logical prime brain to have its say. But if the primal brain is the big dog in the fight, establishing positivity in the program requires the pathways to be built while the big dog sleeps. That is, in times of reduced stress, when you're not stuck deep in the heat of the forge or in the middle of a meltdown. As JFK said, the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. And this too is the time to build positive habits, positive thought processes, and positive programming inside the mind. Perhaps the greatest thing about the human mind is its ability to be programmed, and only programmable by the user. Your choices, your actions, your understanding, your thoughts, and your focus are the determining factor in how your program shows up. Yes, evolution has created an emotional monster for good reason, but it has also blessed us with logic, choice, and agency to be wielded at strategic times to ensure that the autopilot we run is tuned to positive outcomes and not negative craters. The tips on how to build your conscious mind and overcome your limiting beliefs are contained in the videos you'll see suggested for you next. And if you found this intriguing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content to help you optimize your outcomes. My goal is to move everyone from where they are now to where they want to be. But I need you to do your bit. Chase success, be brutal, and don't stop.